Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Wargamer podcast. Yes, it's the Canadian Wargamer podcast featuring two affable and youngish granddads, Mike and James, talking about primarily miniature wargames and the occasional hex and counter excursion from Mike from our unique perspective in the Great White North. And as the strains of La Fide die away, here are your hosts, Mike and James. Yeah. All right. Good evening, folks, and welcome to episode. Geez, I should have looked this up. James, is this episode 16, 17?
Yes,
Yes, that's
definitely. Or it might be the other one.
That's not very helpful. Okay, cut. Okay, hang on.
Go with it. It's funny.
It is funny.
Gee.
Okay. No, this is actually episode 16. There you go. All right, folks, welcome to episode 16 of the Canadian Wargamer podcast. James, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. That was a really natural response to my cue there. Good for you for being awake. We're joined tonight by a really wonderful panel of grognards, and we're going to kick around the question, why are there so many darn Napoleonics rules? And so joining us tonight, in no particular order, but I'm going to start in the Les États Unis. I'm going to start with Jim Ozarski. Jim is joining us tonight from Milwaukee. He is one of the hosts of the Armchair Dragoons podcast. He tells us that he has been Napoleonics gaming since 1980. And he also has a YouTube channel where he does amazing things with friends. The YouTube channel is just Jim Ozarski. The Friday Night Fights feature where you can tune in and see massive battles fought on things like Tabletop Simulator. Very entertaining. So, Jim, welcome to the podcast.
No, a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
A friend of the podcast from also from the States, Don Perrin. Don, you've been on before. Don's a retired Canadian retired Canadian Army officer. Has worked in the hobby in various capacities with some of the great giants. Don was telling us before we got started that he was Duke. Sorry, what's Duke's last name? I can't remember.
Zyfried. Duke Zyfried.
Duke, yeah, Duke Zyfried, right? Of course, Uncle Duke. Yeah, or was that the character from Doonesbury?
No, that's him. Or it might be both, for all I know.
Might be both. But you made figures for him.
Yes, indeed. A lot of figures for him. A lot, like piles and piles.
And he's one of the legends of North American wargaming. So that's yeah. So that's your claim to fame. And you have also. We wanted to give you the credit for being the last publisher of the Courier, but really you're the murderer of the Courier. We talked about that on a previous podcast, but you're
with that.
There's blood on your hands, my friend.
Yeah,
You are Courier, of course, was the voice of Napoleonics wargaming in North America.
Hear the chorus on the miniatures page already.
Yeah, boo. So, Don, welcome. And then from East Toronto, we're very happy to welcome Glenn Pierce. Glenn is the mastermind behind the Napoleonic Miniatures Wargame Society of Toronto, and are you live from your games basement, Glenn?
No, I'm live from the attic at the moment.
Live from the attic. I've had
the
the
other end of the house.
Was there a jazz set there?
Yeah.
Live from the attic?
Live from the attic. Great Napoleonics marches with Glenn Pierce. Yeah.
Yes.
Coming soon.
Saxophone.
Yeah. I've had the
Jeff
pleasure.
Brubeck played there, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Take 5, take 10, take the Imperial Guard. I've had the pleasure of gaming in your basement before. You do amazing things in small scale. Glenn's also a rules writer, and in 2017 Bacchus published his Ruse de Guerre rules as part of their Polemis series. And Glenn was telling us before we started that Ruse de Guerre started life. Do I have this right, Glenn? As an American War of Independence
That's
rule
right.
set, but is in fact a bit of a toolkit that you can use for all sorts of things.
Yeah, it was the only period that they were missing in their range, so that was the mandate
Yeah,
originally.
originally, but it can be used for all sorts of things. And I have
Yes,
been in your basement using it for Napoleonics rules. So,
that's correct. Yes,
and
we
we're hoping. Sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
yeah, and we expanded it to include the French and Indian War and the War of 1812 because we found very little differences in the actual warfare itself. So they were bundled together all under the one package, Vers de Guerre. And then, of course, we realized that the War of 1812 was just a Napoleonic War. So
Hmm.
we use it for Napoleonics as well. And because it is versatile set of rules with a lot of open ends that you can put stuff on, we also use it for the American Civil War. And how we refine it is whoever posts a battle or wants to play a game of some sort, if they see anything that applies to their scenario, it's not in the rules, then they write it up as a scenario only rule.
Hmm.
And so that way, when the members come, they're not forced to learn a new rule set. Every week you change periods.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a club set of rules. That's how it's evolved now.
yeah, and that's really part of you're putting your finger early on part of the thing that we're going to discuss tonight. So we'll come back to that for sure. And we're hoping to be joined by Tom Castaños from Texas. Tom is one of the three guys who does the Anything But a One podcast, and Tom has been doing 15 mil Napoleonics gaming forever. So we're hoping that he'll drop in. So, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Oh, and then of course there's James. James, whose Napoleonic resume is
A.
yeah. James, when was your first? When did you buy your first Napoleonics figures?
Oh, crummies. Um, well, I didn't buy them. I got them for Christmas.
Uh,
I was like 8,
mhm.
and I opened this box under the tree, and it had all these smaller boxes of Airfix Battle of Waterloo figures in it. And it was like, this is amazing. And I was off.
You were off.
Yeah. And then once I started figuring out this whole wargaming thing, it was like, those are the guys I started painting up and using the, and I bought Tricolor out of the mail order section of Wargamers Digest, which was a great magazine. And yeah, and then I started, I found Charles Grant's Charge and Don Featherstone in the library and started writing my own, and things got more and more complicated.
It always comes down to writing your own rules at some point. All right.
Everybody should write their own rules.
Yeah. Maybe that's
I think everybody does, don't they?
Well, there's probably, there's as many half-written sets of rules as there are wargamers out there.
Well, that's true.
But everybody should write them just so they understand, because I really hate these guys that that bang on, why do they have to make it so complicated? My rules are like on one page. It's like, that's because you play with 6 guys that you've played with for 20 years and you know all the conventions, so you can write in this shorthand. Like I tried to do some ancients rules with Don, and it just got more and more complicated. I'm getting playtesters around the world, and they say, when you say this, what do you mean? And now I've got to, oh crap, now I've got to explain how I measure a wheel, right? How I, all the conventions that I'm just assuming, right? And your rules get longer and longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
Then you had army lists and scenarios, and you're like 120 pages.
Yeah. And maybe what you and Glenn are both referring to is the idea that when you have a group of players who meet regularly, because we're all interested in a period, in this case, we're using Napoleonics as our subject, but later on in the conversation, we could expand that to almost any period of wargaming. What we're really talking about, I think, is a common language that allows us to interact, right? If you think of the rules as a language or a dialect. And the problem, I think, maybe that we're having today is kind of like the story of the Tower of Babel from Genesis, right? How many languages do we need? So let's jump into it. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And this is something, Jim, you wrote on Twitter a while ago. And it really caught my attention. So for the sake
I hope I liked that when it came up in my feed.
I got 41 likes. Maybe I'll check.
Yeah, well, it was 41 likes at the time. Yeah, I'm sure it's still going live. So I'm going to read it for those of you who are just listening. Jim wrote, all new rule sets for war games using Napoleonic miniatures should now include a chapter entitled Why These Rules Exist. This chapter would explain what they do differently than the nigh infinite other sets using the same basic maneuver element. And there is part 2 of that tweet, which I don't have. But Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you. I just need to get out of my screen here. There, stop sharing screen. There we go. Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you, and maybe you could explain the circumstances that inspired you to write that tweet, and what maybe some of your thinking was behind it. I mean, we can kind of infer what you were getting at, but maybe you could take a few minutes to talk about what led you to write that.
I was looking at a set of rules. I think everybody else who has ever participated in this hobby, read rules inveterately. It's just what I do. I've certainly owned and read more rules than I've ever played. That's to be stipulated. And I don't think you're a proper wargamer if you haven't. And I was flipping through a new set of rules that I had just picked up. I won't say which. And for the first time in my life, 40 years of wargaming plus, I remember getting angry. And I was just going, oh, for the love of God, stop. Why did you do this? Why did you put this into this space that is so packed and so jammed, and you're bringing nothing new to the table? Literally nothing that I could discern. Now, and I want to be crystal clear about this. I'm absolutely no arbiter of this for anybody. This was my own personal thought. But it's not like I'm going to stand athwart the gaming environment and say, stop. But I did say, number one, stop. And number two, for God's sake, at least tell me what it is you're bringing new to the table that I haven't seen before. Tell me why I should be interested, especially when you're at the same maneuver element. When I think we got to give this to Mike Novak and to Frank Chadwick. When Volley and Bayonet first started playing with brigades as a square, and when Coggins and the others gave us Napoleon's battles and started thinking about brigades, that was a whole different maneuver element. And it changed things. It fundamentally changed, and I could see that evidently. But probably my preferred scale is battalion. And it happened again today. I was paging through another battalion level set of rules, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And then I took it one step farther. I said, give me this thing that explains this to me. And the second thing is, don't tell me certain things, because that's what the second half of the tweet is. Never again tell me I don't have to rebase my figures. That's either a lie or self-evident. Number two, don't tell me ever again that your rules are fast playing. Right. They're not. They aren't. Because I can build a battle big enough to make them not fast playing. Okay, I don't care who you are. I mean, probably the fastest set of rules I've ever played is probably Blucher, I would say. We played Leipzig on the channel with the Armchair Dragoons. We played the entire Battle of Leipzig. It lasted for 62 hours. Blucher's a darn fast playing system, but it took a while, all right? So don't tell me that it's, and the third thing, please don't ever write in a rule set again or on a thing, hey, if you don't like it, you can change it. Of course I can. I bought the thing. I've seen that in so many rule sets. Yeah. I've seen that comment. I'm like, that's, and so you get into this.
A toolbox.
Yeah, it's a toolbox.
I've taken notes now, and I'm going to include all those in every rule set.
That's very good. Very good.
Because those are awesome.
Yeah, those are, and then finally, I don't know if I can return to something I would like you to give me. It sort of go back and forth. It goes to scale. Come on, give me a figure scale. Give me a ground scale. Because, and this is me, I'm a historical battle guy, right? I never want to play in a tournament again as long as I live. I survived the DBA wars. I actually ran Numidians. Those of you who have played DBA know what I'm talking about. You know, I ran Numidians in their heyday, and I never want to do it again. I want to play historical battles. That's a pain in my onces if you don't give me your ground scale and your figure scale, or at least a notional one. So what motivated it? It was just another rule set. And I just feel and then finally, and everybody's circumstances are different, I stipulate. But in my case, it is a challenge to get people involved in the hobby. If you haven't figured it out, I've moved predominantly virtual now. Part of that is my failing eyesight, and part of that is my personal life circumstance. Playing war games on TTS is one of the things is a great convenience. One of the things I have discovered is that when you get people into a rule system and they flesh it out and they experience it and they enjoy it, you start to evolve a lingua franca among those people. You draw more people in. I've drawn people into my own gaming sessions online and on the channel by saying, hey, yeah, we're playing Blucher, or we're playing LaSalle, or we're playing Black Powder. We're doing all these things. Come on over and try it. And if they say, oh, I always wanted to try that, because we fragmented, I guess what I'm saying, we're already an awfully fragmented hobby. And I'm concerned that a further fragmentation of our already small cul-de-sac is something we can ill afford. Is that going to stop people from printing new rules? Of course not. But it just was what I felt as I was flipping through another rule set on a sunny Saturday afternoon.
Gentlemen, I am so very sorry I am late.
That's a horrifying avatar, but awesome in its own way.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you joined us. Thanks. Thanks. You just missed a pretty epic start to our discussion by Jim. So I'm just going to take a minute to introduce you to the rest of the panelists. I don't know if you know. I'm hoping you know some of these folks, at least by reputation. Jim Ozarski from Milwaukee from the Armchair Dragoons. Glenn Pierce from Toronto from the Napoleonic Miniatures Wargames Society of Toronto. Published the Rules Together, Rules with Bacchus. Don Perrin was Duke Siegfried's sidekick for a long time, and was the last person to carry the courier banner. And then James Manto and myself, both hosts of this little podcast, and fans of your podcast, I should say.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So Tom, I'm absolutely glad that you joined us. Maybe you could just speak very quickly to your Napoleonic gaming CV, and then if you've had a chance to think about that tweet of Jim's that I shared, I can either turn it over to you, or I can give you a chance to gather your thoughts while somebody else weighs in on that.
Yeah, no, I've actually thought quite a bit about it. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, you're
okay.
good.
Yeah, so I began my Napoleonic gaming with Empire's version, the very end of 2. Yeah, believe me, I feel exactly the same way. The very end of 2 and into Empire 3. And at a pretty ridiculously young age, I was probably 13 or 14 when I started messing with those. Not only did I scarcely understand them, I had no concept of the investment in figure count to play them properly. I mean, we joke all the time on my show that I paint frighteningly fast, but as a young man, I painted poorly, frighteningly fast, and still couldn't come up with the appropriate number of figures, because if you didn't get to a certain level of a number of units, that whole command structure of Empire Third completely fell apart. You really couldn't play it at a lower size. So, I just started off, I could say the wrong foot. I didn't even start off on a foot. I just started off tumbling head first into one of the most convoluted set of rules ever written, with no hope of return. We went on to, I think it was Garde du Corps, little, mimeographed set of rules. I don't recall the author of that one. We bounced around with Avalon Hill and Napoleon's Battles, which I wanted to love that. and somehow just didn't really ever catch with that one as well. And then finally, we settled into Wilbur Gray's Age of Eagles. Yes, the very one, Michael. We settled into Wilbur Gray's Age of Eagles, the spinoff from, Napoleonic Fire and Fury.
Yeah.
And, and the truth of the matter is there's a couple of things at play here. There's a lot of different kinds of rules that I just mentioned, but we also grew as gamers. What we probably did it completely backwards. We play the easier set of rules now as reasonably intelligent people with huge collections of miniatures, versus starting with probably the absolute worst starting point ever. We did a program on Scott Bowden's rules, and his son commented rather violently that we were imbeciles and very defensive of his father, and he certainly, you should do that, I guess, stick up for family. But we said that it was the wrong set of rules for us at the time. So to go back to the question in the tweet, I think that we have learned so much, not about Napoleonics. I mean, that I won't say that there's not a finite amount of information about the history, but we learn new things about the history, but all in all, we're pretty comfortable with what occurred in the time period. But I do think rule mechanics are getting better. And in our group, we have fairly significant debates about the good old days. And I say, the good old days of thalidomide and polio. I mean, sometimes we wax poetic, and the reality of that memory is somewhat skewed. My wife's a labor and delivery nurse, and she said that blocking of the pain and suffering of having a child is the only thing that allows a woman to have a second child. And I begin to think that war game rules can be the same way. That Ray, for our podcast the other day, said, one of these days I'd kind of like to find a copy of Empire Third and see what we really did wrong. It's like, no, I'm not going to go kiss my ex-wife. We're not going to do this, So I tend to think that we have made better rules, and we hopefully will continue to do so. So I'm perfectly on board with the next flavor of the month.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you touched on nostalgia, because I mean, I think I wax nostalgic back to my little pile of badly painted Airfix miniatures, and playing with really grotesquely modified tricolor rules, and I had some fun games. Yep. Crawling around on the floor with I had like 6 whole trees and 2 cardboard houses, and this one box of cuirassier was like Ney's whole cavalry reserve, and I was having fun, yep. And it's trying to recapture that fun of youth when you know nothing.
Yeah,
and everything is amazing.
Well, then but then the key to that, and I apologize, I don't have a camera available, but I'm equally old and bald. So, except for you, Glenn, you have a charming head of hair there, but and Michael as well.
I'm on the show.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Very good. You got to balance that. The follically challenged. That's awesome. But we talk about all the time that we didn't know anything, then we knew everything, and now we're of an age to be able to admit we still don't know everything, and we probably never will, and we thought we knew more than we did, and and on and on and on. To go back to the Scott Bowden thing, you can go all the way to the chef de bataillon, where he's trying to make you where you're pacing off drill count, and I don't know that anyone alive today knows enough to do a set of rules based on the level that was supposed to be. But ultimately, isn't the whole point of this to have fun and the camaraderie of getting around the table and making fun of one another in good jest? And our mantra is a game played is better than one not.
Yes, that's a good motto. I like that.
It doesn't always play out. We don't play nearly enough, but still, for those that say, and I know this is a Napoleonic talk, but for those that, I can't stand, XYZ World War II rules, they're too simplified, they're too this, they're too that. Yeah, they might be, but did you have a good time? Did you get together and did you play a game that you can talk smack about for years to come, in time for a pint afterwards? And maybe that's also a part of it, our evolving requirement of what we want from a set of rules.
Yeah. And I think that motto of, a game played is better than a game not played, for those of us who are finding ourselves inching ever closer to eternity, is it takes on a certain extra meaning. Glenn, did you have any thoughts you want to share about Jim's contention that, at the very least, a new set of rules should justify its existence?
Well, yeah, I kind of like that idea. I think that's good, but who's going to actually do it? I mean, each author, is going to write what they're going to write, and so be it. Sometimes also, when you're writing a set of rules, you're under a certain mandate, such as the number of pages. And when you're under these kind of restraints, you got to select what you're going to say and what you're not going to say. And although it'd be nice to have a little chapter, like Jim says, maybe at the end to explain why and embellish it a bit more. So I basically agree with him. And I think Tom brings out some brilliant points that the rules themselves, I agree, they're evolving and they're changing and they're improving. Now, you get the odd lame duck and you go, why the hell did the guy write that? But overall, as far as I
Are we
can see
naming
it,
names, Glenn?
no.
Oh, okay, very good. All right.
Well, I don't know, chaps. I think we shouldn't be that afraid to step on toes if because we're all speaking from our passions, right? I mean, let's be diplomatic, but if you want to name a set of rules for something you liked or something you didn't like, feel free.
I'll say this, and I want to be ultimately clear that there is nothing wrong with the rules that I'm about to mention, and it is all taste, right? It's all what floats your boat. But I've had some remarkable discussions with David Estinis, the author of Estinis, very good, the author of ESR, and we talked about that that nostalgia. Reading his rules gave us that nostalgia for a game that had a little more meat to it. That I loved the idea that you're shaking out your column into a battle formation. There seemed to be so much to it until I played it. And I put this squarely on my shoulders, that my memory of what I thought I wanted didn't play out to be the reality of what I actually enjoyed. And for those and there are a great audience for that game, and more power to them. But I think, again, I think it was more nostalgia that I wanted that level. I struggled through that. And again, that's no reflection on his rules. I think they're outstanding. Just what I want out of a rule set now.
Mm-hmm.
On a completely biased basis, we just finished playing that game for 9 hours on the channel. He ran us through an 1809 scenario. David actually helped me host, and it was a very interesting experience. And I have two things. Number one, he does it in some ways to me. And I've said this to him, and he says it wasn't there, but it just feels, if you've ever read Patty Griffith's Wargaming for Fun,
yes,
Napoleonic Wargaming for Fun, his game plays a lot like I pictured in my head Patty's army game playing. And so I was very excited to play ESR. I had the second edition, got the third edition, did all this stuff. I'll tip the hat. I really enjoy them, but I do find them a bit of a mind screw, because they're very, very different from what I'm used to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wandering around. But I'll give you my example. And it's one of those things that, and I'm going to get the name wrong. It's all over. Is it Napoleon at War?
Oh yeah, Napoleon at War. Yeah,
that's out the last 2 minutes and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played it. I have not played it, and that's critical to me, that I measure my response with that. But I've read the rules. I haven't. I've looked at the videos. And I just don't see it. It is almost the classic case of what I'm talking about here. I don't understand why these exist. I see absolutely nothing. And don't tell me the cards. Do not tell me the cards. Because I love Commands and Colors Napoleonics. Sin confessed. Richard Borg is a gaming hero to me. So it's not like I've got some prejudice there, but I just don't see it. And it's that it isn't the nostalgia, because the first set of rules I ever played was a homebrew set by the name of Grand Tactics from the greatest war game store to ever exist. It's even better than the Emperor's headquarters. Take that. Place called Napoleon's up here in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. Owner
Not
passed
anymore,
away.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, went away some years. Yeah, killed by the internet, as many things were.
Sorry, I have to ask, is that the Whitefish Bay that's referred to in the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald?
It is not. And every time Gordon Lightfoot shows up in Milwaukee, we all cheer for that. He goes, "It's not the same one. That one's way up on the UP."
Okay.
The searchers all say. But yeah, no, Fritz died just a few years ago, and he was a good friend. And I learned to play Napoleonics using his rules. I picked them up just some years ago, and I went, "Oh my God, these are horrible." You've got a 60-to-1 figure ratio, and you got guys opening garden gates. It's insanity. So it's not nostalgia. It's a thing about, what are you bringing? What are you adding? And please tell me it's not just you're trying to sell miniatures, you're trying to sell a line of things or anything like that. So that's a big, and it is interesting though, because Tom is absolutely correct. There is no doubt that it's subjective, and it's the game that you're looking for at this point in your life. That is, couldn't be more right.
Right. Don?
I think we wonder about, or at least I wonder, that the rules writer is not a professional product developer. We're not talking about a person who has analyzed the market, raised capital, and went out there and built a product. This is more a level of obsession. You started off with a light entry into Napoleonics, and you descended until you thought you knew everything. We already talked about that level. You later learn you know nothing, but you don't. But there's a time in between there.
Yeah.
While you know everything, you have to write your own set of rules, because that's how you tell everybody you know everything. But really, in the internet, at least the Zoom era, I think you get your street cred in the Napoleonic world, if there is such a thing, with the 15 guys that you know by publishing your own rules. And a guy, like in Milwaukee, if you publish them and then you got him into Napoleon's, or Todd Fisher picked him up and put him in his store, you were famous for those 12 guys or 50 guys that were in that neighborhood. If you went all the way out to HMGS East and played at Historicon, they never heard of you, and they don't know who you are. So it's really a level of looking at this is a symptom of the psychosis, rather than it is a product moving out into the world to gain dominance. I'm sure there are a few of those. I suspect maybe Napoleon's battles might have been one of them, but yeah, well, exactly. But 9/10 of them, or 99/100 of them, are, hey, I never read a set of rules that had 60 guys opening a garden gate before, so I better write one, because that's important in my game, and that's what makes me the expert.
That's right. I'm a corps commander that has to issue orders, but yet I still have to deploy a skirmish screen. Yeah, that's exactly the.
Would we be talking about Empire?
Maybe. Yeah.
I was
there's a flow chart.
I was once suckered into a game of battle, or replay of Battle of Waterloo, where they said it'll be fast play Empire. They lied.
What did I say? That's a lie.
Yeah.
You didn't have to rebase anything. Come on.
Well, it wasn't.
You didn't have to rebase.
That's so funny, because I have some Revolutionary era French currently soaking in a pan in my kitchen, trying to get them off of bases that they were mounted for some 60-to-1 game. I bought them at a swap meet, beautifully painted figures, but it's like, no, they got to come off of these bases.
Yeah.
But that's an excellent point, may I add, of the of how rules have developed and have changed over time, that we don't do that anymore. That most rules written today are in fact relatively agnostic about basing. And in the 80s or the 70s, that was heresy. I mean, if it didn't do the math to calculate as to exactly how long a line of Prussian Fusiliers would be, at the ready, you were just a hack. And now we realize the world is a little more fluid than that, and people don't lose their minds. The old adage, as long as everybody's stuff is based roughly the same. I can remember the first game I played where you didn't remove miniatures, or I didn't need a little bag of casualty caps. And that seemed like heresy because I had a stunning collection of casualty caps, and now I didn't get to use them anymore. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Now everyone's using those little dial markers or whatever.
Yeah.
I noticed I was listening to the WISS podcast. I can't remember if it was Guy Powers or Jasper Ortiz was talking to Warwick Kincaid about his new rules. What are they called? Soldiers of Napoleon, I think.
Yeah.
And they put the same they put Jim's question to Kincaid. I think they'd obviously read your tweet, Jim, and they said, like, why does the world need your set of rules? And his answer was basically, well, because they're card driven, and no one else has ever done a card driven set of rules before. And I thought, well, okay, yeah,
ever really?
That's objectively false.
Well,
provably.
Command and Colors isn't Command and Colors card?
Of course
driven?
it is. Of course
yeah,
it is.
it is.
There you go. It's been around ages. Sharp practice. Card driven.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more, and I have to say, just personally, I am at the saturation point where I am not going to go out and look at Warwick Kincaid's rules, because, I mean, I know he's done great things with World War II stuff, and he has a certain reputation, but I wonder personally, and some of you referred to this, so I'm going to put this question to you: how much rules writing is driven by the fact that somebody either has, and I'm being cognizant that some of you have written your own Napoleonics rules, so I'm treading carefully here. It's just that, I know the period, either I know the period better than other people, or I just know the kind of game that I want to play, and I can sell my friends on it, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, it's a form of psychosis.
Well,
I got nothing other than what Don said. I'm just endorsing.
Yeah, I heartily agree, because you look for the game you want to play, and if you can't find it, and I find personally, it's easier to learn a set of rules if you're writing it than it is trying to read a book and play, like, especially for a fairly complicated style of warfare like Napoleonic Wars.
right.
I mean, maybe it's because we just know too goddamn much, because there's all these diaries and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can do a core level game, but the designer says, oh, but I've got to worry about what the rifle armed half platoon of Russian Jaegers are doing.
Yeah.
It's like, what? You should be commanding like at least 5,000 men in a move. You don't care what the Jaeger platoon is doing.
Right.
Which is where Empire really fell apart for me. Even I had somebody say, oh no, it's great. Once you get, you can manage those skirmish lines and everything. I was just like, is that the only game you play? So you have them memorized and your whole club is like that? Then
that's coming back to the idea of, and this is something that we've argued in our own group many times, the old you must form square kind of thing. And what was the actual tactical relevance if you had a well-placed line with its flanks anchored, and would that have been a thing? Is it more of a morale thing? Is it more of a functional thing? And you can debate that for days and days and days. But every set of rules has their version of that kind of thing. And like you said, when you find the one that fits what you think is right, then that's the set of rules for you. And if you don't find one, then either you house rule the hell out of something, or you do it yourself. You can, if you want to house rule something, the best rules in the world are black powder, right? Because there's no, if ever there was a set of rules where there's no set of rules, you can do pretty much as you wish, and I say that tongue in cheek, and we play the hell out of it,
they move along fast.
Yep.
Like, and yeah,
You
you
don't
can
have to rebase.
you can have a fast moving game, throw some insults and dice around, and have some fun. Like,
And
I
if you
love
can't
it.
insult your friends, what can you do?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love Black Powder for American Civil War.
And actually, without getting off topic, I think that's the single best supplement they ever wrote for those rules. But either way, that's another podcast, right? American Civil War. But
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
To me,
Well, and you could argue
I'm finding that I'm trending towards portability and community rather than fidelity of rules. If the rules that I'm interested in don't include the 60 men to open the garden gate, but they do include chapters of people playing all across the country or all across the world, I'm more interested in that because Warhammer taught me that, of all things, and that is, I could fly to London, England, or I could fly to St. Petersburg, Florida, and have a game with somebody I've never met, and they have a reasonably close interpretation of the rules similar to what I have. And I think things like Age of Eagles is approaching that, in that there are Age of Eagles people all over the world now. Right. And that if you know how to play, chances are you can find somebody in driving distance of wherever you are or wherever you're going. And that has an appeal to me. And it also, with this internet thingy,
It'll
we
never
can talk
catch
about it. And right or wrong, if the brigade sergeant major doesn't have the gate key for the garden gate, we'll get past it and move on.
Yep.
I can't even tell you how much I agree with that too. To me, that's the Blucher thing. The TTS groups I play with, I've got a regular participant who is, I think latest I heard he was in Brittany. I've got one in Kent. I've got all 3 times, 3, right? We got 3 time zones, 4 in America. One in Hawaii, 4.5. There you go. And I've got that, and the lingua franca, which was a really key part of the original tweet, was that I really want to see before I die something of lingua franca, at least run a couple sets. And one of them has absolutely, for me, been Blucher. Even though it has its limitations, to be sure, but the fact that Alex Southern from Storm of Steel has played those games remotely with people from the East Coast, and I've got friends who tell me that it's just a thing they just get together with their group and say, "Come on, guys, let's pick one, play that, and that'll be our thing." And yeah, of course, there's this excitement of, oh, look at the cool new thing that just came in the mail. I get that. But at a certain point, there's an incredible value to, and I'm stealing the word, portability. That really matters. Because there's no point doing it yourself.
And I think that's where you see things like, Warhammer Napoleonics, or Shaco's Rampant, which somebody's because they like this system and they understand it. So it's like, well, now let's play this other set of rules and or this other period and modify the rules we know.
Age of Eagles is exactly that, right?
Yeah.
It's Fire and Fury.
Yeah.
And it's a good brigade level game, unlike Napoleon's battles.
Yep.
Right.
Well, and you go back to, 2 things come to mind. First of all, Blucher, is there no better example of what we talked about in the evolution of games than most of Sam Mustafa's games? Sam's been on our show a number of times, and I always wait with bated breath the next thing he does, because he's remarkably innovative, in my opinion. And I have not liked all of the innovations. There have been games that I thought were tremendous hits on his part, with Blucher being one of them. And there were some that I didn't jive with, like Longstreet as much. But something came up. We played a game recently, and we had a friend down from what's known as Central Texas, and of course we're dealing with a our own little continent down here. So Central Texas and South Texas are still hours and hours apart. But he came down and he played Age of Eagles with us for the first time. And we played a very small scenario. It was just 2 players and I refereed the game. And the next day he was going to put on an American Civil War game for us using the Altar of Freedom rules. And I think of Age of Eagles as being a very elegant set of rules that plays very easily. And our guest, of course, picked up the rules right away. He'd never played Fire and Fury either, which kind of surprised me. But they're not a difficult set of rules to learn. No. And within 3 or 4 turns, he knew the charts and he's out there and he's maneuvering and he's shooting. And what he came away with was the number of bases to move, the number of little pieces to keep track of, versus say, a Blucher or an Altar of Freedom, where also a brigade level game, but a brigade, and he plays in 6 mil, is 1 card in miniatures. So, we're playing roughly the same command level game, but he's playing with 9 or 12 pieces versus 9 or 12 brigades made up of anywhere from 8 to 18 stands individually. Mm-hmm. So he had a very interesting point that something to him that makes a new game good is if he's not toting around 60,000 little bases of miniatures. And, I don't know where I fall on that, but I do agree it's easier, most certainly.
Yeah. Well, and you can see where things like, Age of Eagles and Napoleon's battles, they obviously said, well, we want to do bigger games, we need to maneuver brigades, but we have these, armies already already based up for Empire or Tricolor. So we're not going to rebase, we're just going to call it something different now.
Well, you don't have to rebase, you know that, right?
No, yeah, exactly. And it's fast play.
No, but you do.
And
stop it. What? Stop it now.
Yeah.
But likewise, and this is a sales pitch thing. And Michael, you held up the Napoleon's battles rules, but here we are with a very sound collection of miniatures, and Avalon Hill releases those scenario books, and one has Leipzig in it. It's like, who has the time, who has the figure count, who has
one, right?
There is who has the gymnasium, right? So Richie Hall was putting on a game just recently, and I think it was 1815. It was June 16, right? And it was this magnificent 28 millimeter game, and I just saw the pictures, and it was just wall to wall humanity of figures, and I'm thinking, how do you maneuver? Yeah. How do you do that? So one of the things that comes to mind with us these days, when we were young and started, there were the Hinchcliffe True 25 mil, but what appealed to us were the racks and racks and racks of 15 mil minifigs, because they were cheaper. We were young. We didn't have great jobs, so you could get more bang. Yeah, you could get bang for the buck. They were at the time being packaged directly for Empire, so it was very easy to grab a couple of battalions here and there. But we've all said if 6 mil had been a thing in the 80s, we'd have millions of 6 mil.
Yes,
just for the space and all the things that you can do with that. So I think in a new set of rules, if it is scale agnostic, that's a big deal for me now too.
Yeah. And we could spend another hour just talking about scale profusion, let alone rules. Yeah. I'm really interested in what Jim said about the lingua franca. If there's, because I used the analogy of the Tower of Babel that we're in right now. James and I had a really interesting discussion a couple of episodes back with a young woman who's part of a group here in Ontario, whose target audience is primarily college and university students, and they do their project involves a lot of tabletop simulator stuff, very similar to what Jim does, and their focus is 7 Years' War. And they've been telling us that they use Blucher as a very successful kind of teaching tool to get people interested in horse and musket gaming. And I'm really, really interested in the value of systems like that, even though some of us might look at them and say, well, they lack the complexity that I'm looking for, or whatever. Where was I going with that? and that I guess leads to another question, right? Is you know, do we have the time in our gaming careers to invest in new systems? And David's set of Napoleonic rules, the David and Stennis's rules, which have that very curious name. What was it? Was it sans résultat?
It sounds résultat.
Yeah, yeah. So a game without a resolution, like which is
Yeah, it's like ominous.
Well,
not a very
he's he's quoting, he's obviously quoting Marat after Ilo.
Yeah, yeah, and a certain time a Napoleonic gamer would know that, but the guy who's
Good.
just,
I've made that point to him. I said,
Yeah.
you do realize you're pitching to the choir on that one.
yeah, and that's the other thing. I think there's a certain elitist kind of quality in this part of the hobby, which is probably replicated in other parts of the hobby too. I'm sure there.
Well, Michael, let me jump in there. There was a discussion on his Facebook page where someone questioned the logic of his army list investing so heavily in the language of the army, that it wasn't a kind of a generalized grenadier. He uses the Russian term, he uses the Austrian term. And someone said, for someone that's new to the game, it's daunting to learn this. And David's point was, well, I explain it in the foreword of each of those, which is true that he does. And then someone jumped in with a very elitist, well, don't go for the easy way out. Maybe this is your chance to learn something. It's like, it's his chance to go back to Warhammer.
Yeah.
I do question the logic in that. I like learning something new. I think most of us do. But if it leads to a potential impairment of learning the game, maybe that's not the best tool to use.
Well, come on, even Warhammer has, like, I don't know, 22 armies, and a Hormagaunt is a lot different than a Space Marine, is a lot different than a Guardsman, is a lot
True.
different than a blah, blah, blah,
True.
blah, blah. So, I mean, they're not afraid of it.
That is true.
And this came in the mail today. This is my I have now both of his books, the scenario books. I'll let David speak for himself. He's a big kid. I don't know if he imagines this as a gateway game. That's the weird bit. I mean, I know he's trying to present a completed package, but I'll absolutely agree with Tom that there is a thing when you're going. I've been at this a long time, and I'll be going down his army lists, going, "Wait a minute, what are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Some of his
and
lists are wrong.
Yeah. And he's had to put out errata because he does get told that. But when you're that detailed, it's the same thing. Michael Hopper, probably the greatest living Shaco scenario designer, his many books. He's got, when he makes me go to my guidebooks and go, what the heck unit is he talking about? And I got to figure out what that unit looks like. I got no idea how 16-year-old Jim back in 1980 would have been trying to figure this out. And we're better now. But I think also, and that's, and Michael, to your question, to your point, I really think that if we're going to build this community to the place where sure, it's part of it. I know I've got fewer years ahead than behind. That's not a secret. It's 70, baby. But besides that, I do kind of want to leave something behind. I want to leave a hobby behind. I want to leave something behind. And how do we bring people in? I thought that the lady, I think she's a professor, is she not? I thought they used Maurice, or do they use Blucher?
They use both, but they use Blucher as their recruiting tool.
Is that right? Okay, well, that's terrific. And I think I've taught Blucher for Sebastian Bay's Georgetown folks. That Georgetown Society. I've taught that on TTS. I've done it for a number of seminars. And the joy of seeing a rule set click in people that maybe don't have that background and experience is really pretty freaking cool. And have them say, well, maybe I won't be a big Napoleonicist nerd, but I'd do this again.
Yeah.
To me, that's a gigantic win. I'm not going to do that with ESR. I'm just not. I'll do it with Black Powder. I'll do it with Blucher. Certainly do it with Commands and Colors if people were more inclined that way. And I'm really looking for people to iterate and build a community build a portability around that. And that's I think what motivated me in the first
Yeah,
instance.
and then you get people in, and then they can go off, and you point them at, well, here's Hathorn Thwaite, here's 10 million different Osprey titles you can start buying.
Yep.
And then they can start climbing up to their own pinnacle of ignorance and write their own set of rules.
Well,
And
at what
what
point develop
And
a
then
psychosis?
they will realize that that they've been really silly, and they will slide back down.
Yeah.
At what point do you break the Otto von Pithka Digby Smith story to him?
Sorry, you've lost.
But what?
Yeah, you've lost us. Go ahead.
Oh, the books by Otto von Pithka and Digby Smith. Are you familiar
No.
They're a
with those
delight.
books? Yeah, they're a delight, and they're the same guy.
Yeah.
Let him read a couple of those, and break the news to him that one was a nom de plume, or one was a ghost writing name. But anyway, that's a stupid joke. Sorry.
No.
I liked it. It's okay.
Yeah.
We touched on it earlier, but I wonder how much new rule sets are, let's take something we already know and modify it to something we're learning about now. Much like that, taking an existing rule set and modifying it to the new, to taking it into Napoleonics. I think that's the main trend I've seen in the last 10 years. Have you guys seen the same thing, or are you seeing more new rules that are just brand new out of the box?
I find a lot of I always kind of like, especially with ancients rules, since I'm more familiar with the development there, is I kind of look at what's their genetics. Is this basically refashioned DBA? Is this refashioned Warhammer or something? And I get a little bit with Napoleonics where it's like, this is just Empire, but he's done this to it, or so yeah, like sometimes they're just modifying it.
One of my current heroes in the space, I know we've spoken about his rules a couple times, is Greg Wegman from Little Wars TV.
Mhm.
He's and I think every one of his rules is clearly a borrowing from somewhere. Age of Hannibal, he directly credits a lot of things that he took from Chipko's games, right? There's a lot of Blucher in Altar of Freedom.
Mhm.
In fact, there are some ways that I wish that Blucher was as streamlined as Altar of Freedom. And he's dug out a lot of those things. The rule set that I was thinking of, I was trying to come up with another set of card-driven rules, and I couldn't remember. Le Fou Sacré, that was released by the LardEhs.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That was card-driven.
Mhm.
And yet that was the one, and I think it was Don who said it clearly. The rug doctor, the guy who wrote them, he had a bunch of Empire guys lying around, but Empire had pissed him off. and so he wrote some rules that dealt with what he hated about Empire, and yet he built up a system. So yeah, you can get some really, really strong derivations. Frankly, I think Artie Conliffe riffed Shaco based on Empire. I can't prove that, but I strongly suspect it.
I suspect 85% of all rules out there are, I tried these rules and here are the things I didn't like, so I fixed them.
Yeah.
Or you get somebody, and Glenn made this point earlier, who's constrained by what the publisher is asking them to do, right? So a good example, and a game that James and I just played last week at a small event, is Dave Brown's General d'Armée rules, which is the latest to Fat Lardy's Napoleonic offering. Now, I don't know the sequence, but it is very, very similar in its mechanics to Dave's Pickett's Charge rules. There are just some modifications.
Pickett's Charge came first.
Yeah. So, clearly he's porting, he's saving himself a lot of labor, and he's being a smart rules writer. And he's meeting Richard Clark's request for a Napoleonics game that will flesh out the publisher's stable, right? Mm-hmm. So, you can ask, is it a does it do anything new? Does it offer? I mean, it's an interesting set of rules. It's fairly crunchy. You could argue that, it's a bit confused in terms of its focus. Is it putting you in the role of a division commander or of a corps commander? Dave's rules are kind of ambivalent about this, what the player is actually doing. But it was interesting when we were talking to some of the other players afterwards. I mentioned that I was also playing a lot of Sam's LaSalle rules at the moment, and which I also really like.
You too.
They're simple, kind of tactical rules, and they're fun. And I got the response, "Oh, I don't like those rules. They're way too gamey." And I thought, well,
Play the game there, dude. Play the
yeah,
game.
well, we are playing game.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this because I feel dirty if I don't. I don't like General Darmay. I do not like it. I think Dave is a bright designer. Obviously, he has immense respect, immense popularity, and if I'm the only guy howling in the wilderness, so be it. I think he is one of the most opaque rule writers I've ever encountered.
Yeah, it's hard to tease out what he's getting to.
Yeah, it's and oh, by the way, can I add to my list at the beginning? Don't you ever be chatty with me in your rules.
Yeah.
Don't be chatty. I don't need I one of my previous iterations, I was a bill drafter. So
Right.
I've written laws that people actually have to follow. And might try to overthrow. And so I sit there and I go, what are you telling me? And I caught him. I was trying to read it again today in preparation for this to see if maybe, but I can't. Whereas Sam Mustafa can work for me or work with me, or I'll work for him.
Yep.
His rules, I know what he's telling me. I mean, even though I disagree with him, I know what he's telling me. But to your point, Michael, and it's a significant grievance with me, somebody somewhere posted that General Darmay was a fast playing. Oh, that was it. You mentioned this. That somebody posted that this was a big battle game. And I said, the screaming blue hell it is. If that rule set gets above a division, you tell me that's a multi-core level game? No.
Yeah,
absolutely
it's too
not.
crunchy for more than a division, maybe 2 divisions, but
no, it's too much cha-cha. There's way too much cha-cha.
Rules can go one end to the other in the spectrum. I like to bring up my good buddy Pete Panzeri from HMGSE's fame.
I got a shirt.
He runs huge games of whether it be Napoleonics or whatever.
Yeah.
He uses what he calls the Santa Ana rules.
Yeah.
And they're like half a step up. I won't even say a full step up, but half a step up from if something was included with your little green army men at the Walmart, that's probably what you would have gotten. I mean, they're bone simple, but and there's no realism whatsoever in it. However, after 6-8 hours of play or whatever, and you go talk to the players, they're all telling you stories about stuff that sounds like a Napoleonics battle, with interesting ebbs and flows and interesting stuff, and everybody had a great time. So I have to argue sometimes with the guys who want Empire 3. I fell off the flow chart on page 4 versus Pete's games, which are like bog standard. If your dog ate your rules, you're really no worse off because you just keep playing.
Yeah, I rolled a 6 and hit something.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was a 1. I don't know. Let's roll for 1s now. But they still have fun, and you're playing a game versus you're not playing a game. So yeah, there you go.
And that's where Richard Clark's approach to game design and publishing, I think, is really good. Because people, simulation, the whole simulation versus playability versus fun aspect. And he says, you can be fun, and you can still simulate. You just have to be very clear about what aspect you're simulating, right, and then abstract everything else. So if we're going to simulate, I'm Napoleon, then you really got to abstract what's happening with that platoon of Russian skirmishers. They have to disappear. Which is really unfortunate for Russian soldiers right now. But
so is that just poor rule writing going on? Okay, never mind. We'll stop.
Right. Somebody's not rolling enough sixes.
Yeah, they're rolling
Oh.
a lot of ones.
I was going
Yeah.
to say, I think it's more critical fails than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
But that's the problem with Empire, right? They're trying to be, and the whole telescoping time concept where you're moving, your divisions and cores around until you get to within the engagement space, and then things slow down in this crunchy little battle. It's like, that's great, but why am I maneuvering battalions of 12 figures around and worrying about that?
Well, allow me to just open up another huge can of worms while we're on this. And here's a fine line in game design. I have historically played Austrians. I have gone snowblind painting thousands upon thousands of little white soldiers.
Nice.
And
like Austrians.
Yeah, and absolutely they can roll with the punches, but
Yeah.
so where is the sweet spot in a set of rules? Playing the Austrians in Scott Bowden's rules was pointless because he built so heavily into his troop ratings that the pole vaulting nuclear French old guard and their ICBM 12 pounders had nothing could compete. Yeah. And then if that didn't finish you off in troop ratings, then he completely finished you off in officer ratings, where you're actually saddled with commanders that gave you negatives versus positive. The best thing you could do for Rosenberg was to frag him, right? Was to just like take him out yourself, So there's that side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then you go to
that I think is Scotty Bowden's big weakness as a rules writer.
It's almost racist.
He's picked a side. The French can do no wrong. The French get all the bonuses.
Yeah.
And it's like I haven't read, I don't have a huge massive library of Napoleonic books, but I know enough that the French army of 1805 is way different from the French army of 1813.
Right. So to continue my point, then it is then the opposite end of the spectrum. If you want to go to the extremes, this pendulum swings, you go to a set of rules that's like almost completely nationality agnostic, where everybody's musketeer is the same and everybody's fusilier is the same. And there's that idea that you're the commander, you're the bonehead or the Napoleon, you're the Archduke John versus the Wellington. And I don't like that either, because there is a flavor to the fact that there is some very historical precedent that Austrian troops weren't the most, they were rather lethargic in some of the things that they did. So how much of that do you put in? How much of that do you put into a set of rules that gives you the flavor of the various nationalities without making it virtually impossible to play the Spanish?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, conversely to Tom, I mean, if the person is, fond of guys who wear a red shirt, it's just an accident that I'm wearing red tonight because I'm not especially pro-Anglo. But, if you believe that the British Army in the Peninsula could do nothing wrong, and that every battle unfolded like an episode of Sharp's Rifles, then they'll probably be another bias, right, where the French are just nincompoops. And somebody used the phrase "a pinnacle of ignorance" earlier. I was listening to Zach White and his Napoleonicist podcast recently, where he was talking to some historians, and one of them said, we may have actually gotten a lot of the French army's doctrine in the peninsula wrong. We may actually have undercredited their sophistication and professionalism. We just sort of assumed that the French just formed column and charged, the nearest bristling line of guns and rifles. And, he says, so that leaves me wondering, because I'm no expert on the Peninsular War, that just leaves me wondering, like, how much don't I know and how much don't the rules writers know?
Yeah.
Well, the biggest example, and it comes up all the time when we play Shako, which is a favorite rule of mine. I still love it. Just that, you talk about nostalgia, that's my nostalgia.
Good things about them.
It's a fun rule set. It is. It became a lot of other things when people started dangling baubles on it, which I never cared for. But it's got a basic rule: the French can change formation and move up to 1813. No other army can. It's a, you know, and anybody who plays Shaco, you're going to come down to a conclusion based on that simple fact alone. And I've seen fights break out. Oh, yes, I have. You know, over something like that. So yeah, we make, look, and this goes all the way back to my tweet. I want you to tell me your story. Tell me your story. What's your argument? What arguments are you making? What do you think? What's the most important maneuver element? What do you think about the quality of French troops? All these things. Once again, read Sam Mustafa's designer notes.
Yeah.
Number one, they are funny as heck. Number two, he tells you what he thinks and why he thinks it.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't say sorry. You know,
You weren't supposed to get chatty. That was one of your rules.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But
It's
and he
you put that
interlaces it
in the
throughout the
designer
rules.
notes.
It's not in the back. It's
it's
after a
That's
chapter
right.
at the bottom. It's
Yeah,
here's why I don't like this. Yeah.
I got into a thing today on his Facebook page because somebody posted, "Are you telling me that my artillery can't fire over my infantry?" And I'm saying that's right. In Blucher and in LaSalle, Sam has made clear, just like he don't let you fire from water. You can't shoot from the water and you can't fire over your infantry, period, full stop. And Sam will tell you why he thinks that's stupid. And by the way, because he is a PhD on the West with his dissertation on the Westphalian army during the Napoleonic Wars, he knows what he's talking about.
You might have a clue.
I know.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I said I would start wrapping this up like 25 minutes ago.
Well, it didn't help that I was late. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I'm really happy for our discussion, and I think I'm just going to maybe sort of give each of you a chance for some final thoughts, and then I'll thank you all, because there's just sort of a limit to what we can ask people to listen to. But you guys were so you guys are so great. I'm going to start top left. Glenn, final thoughts?
Well, I think it brought out the fact that the rules are just so diversified and so different, and that the new rule sets are all trying to improve on what has gone before them. Some of them missed the mark terribly, and others hit it. And I see it as overall kind of a golden period for rules, actually, because they're being written to serve all the different little pockets of our hobby. So, but to Jim's original point, yeah, if someone can put that into the rule system as well as footnotes, whatever, that's great.
Great, thanks. Don, final thoughts?
My final thoughts are that essentially I agree with Jim's original premise there, that show me what you're bringing to the table here that's different than what I already have, and kind of sort of I already have a favorite, and you better have something in there that pulls me away, otherwise I'm not going. Mine currently is AJ Eagles, but honestly, from the discussion tonight, it might be that you guys have convinced me to look at Blucher. So there's an example of how that might work.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. If today I was going to go to the local library and teach people about Napoleonic wargaming, I'd probably go in there with black powder or some streamlined version of it with some pre-printed cards that of my own manufacturer of what the little troop types do and what their ratings are, so they're not, flipping through books and things like that. But for me, the thing that has changed, and it's so funny because we've played Age of Eagles since it came out, really before it came out, when it was the Yahoo group Fire and Fury Napoleonics. We began with that. And we kind of came to the realization that this person had brought up the fact about, so many bases and so much stuff that you're moving, that, we're kind of looking for that. We've played Blucher, and we're kind of also leaning that direction. Talk about a physical portability, not the portability we discussed earlier where you can go anywhere and play the game. I literally don't have to bring, a wheelbarrow full of miniatures along to do this game. So I think the thing that I take away is that my personal requirement of the games are changing. And I don't know that they always fit with what the current trend in a game is, but it does influence it. It does influence when I have the opportunity to play a complete game that comes to some kind of reasonable known completion. You know, my greatest pet peeve were those 60-1 games that you played for 12 hours. And then for the next 8 years, you argued, well, if we would have had one more turn, I would have gotten my blankety blank Cossack reinforced, you know, how about let's play this to a conclusion? And these newer games typically give you that opportunity. So I love seeing new products come out. Do I switch and jump to every one? No, I probably like to read rules more than I like to read novels. And you learn from it. You learn from it, and you, if nothing else, you learn what you don't want.
Thanks, Tom. Jim.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to have been with each of you and to have spoken with you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Secondly, I think I've taken a lot of things, particularly from Don, that I'm going to steal. I'll try to mail him a quarter every time I use this. I very much appreciate those thoughts. But to Tom's point, this is now Napoleonic gaming, if nothing else, is a mature market. It's been around for a long time. It has established tropes. It has established things. And if you're going to enter it, if you are going to put something into it that isn't something that you and your 6 buddies are going to play because you hated everything else, it just sucked, it wasn't where you were, so I'm going to do this, fine. If you're going to publish it, I don't care if you do it on Amazon or your own company or all this stuff, tell us why we care. We're not being cynical. Frankly, odds are I'm going to buy it. I can't not. You know, it's that ship has sailed. My ability to restrain myself from buying rule sets. My wife seriously installed a bookshelf behind me for my rule sets. That's the volume I'm talking about. And so if you're going to do that, please tell us why we care. Give us good, and it doesn't have to be volumes. I get Glenn's point completely. Tell us why we care, and then welcome, because I agree. We are well served in many cases by the best of what comes out, but there's a lot that sucks.
Thanks.
Well, I guess it's my
James.
turn now.
Yeah, your turn.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, we're out of time. Sorry.
thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to Don there, who, you know, when I was at the Historicon in the dealers market, the one time I actually managed to go, and I was like, oh, should I buy these nice buildings or should I buy this set of rules? And Don said, don't buy a set of rules you're never going to play. Terrain's always an investment. And I've carried that as a motto with me forever. And so I think long and hard before I spend my hard-earned cash on a new set of rules. I'm very cheap that way. But and Glenn kind of hit on, like, it made me, something Glenn said made me think, it's kind of like pop music, right? You got all these bands, right? And people our age go, oh, music these days sucks, right? Because you're hearing everything that's coming out and hitting the top 40, and some of it sucks. But when we were young, back in, when dinosaurs were putting records on the radio for us, a lot of that music sucked terribly. But the stuff we're still listening to on the oldies stations is the stuff that has been distilled and has hung on and is good, right? Like, Age of Eagles is still being played, even though it's 30 years old now?
Probably.
Right? And it's still being played because it's a solid set of rules. Black Powder is hanging on, even though it's been out for 20 years now. Whereas other rules on Shaco is another fine example of a good set of rules which people enjoy and keep playing, and that's been around for how long, Jim?
The original, it's a little over 30 years.
Yeah, like that's eons in wargaming, right? And but a bunch of these other rules will fall away. They won't gain any traction. I imagine Blucher will be one of these rules which will still be getting played 30 years from now, right? It's it's going to be the Beatles hit, whereas maybe Age of Napoleon, or what was the one, the Osprey, Absolute Emperor.
Oh.
Right, Absolute Emperor was that the singles release by the generic, the generic girl band that couldn't play the guitars.
Yeah, it's Don't get me started on Absolute Emperor, please.
And they won't be on the greatest hits of the 2020s.
I think if you go back to Jim's opening diatribe, Absolute Empire does everything that Jim said that rule set shouldn't do.
If you go back on my Twitter feed, I'll only say this, will be very quick. Go to my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
You will find me anonymously live tweeting a rule read. That's what I'm live tweeting.
All right. Okay. I'm with you. Yeah. So I'm going to start just my wrap up by saying a couple of things about me. If you met me in my early 40s, I would have said, which is actually not too long ago. Okay, it's a while ago. I would have said, I will never get into Napoleonics gaming because it's too complicated, and I'll never get into Ancients gaming. And, I was a World War II guy, I was an American Civil War guy, and I thought those were my sweet spots. Now I'm, fascinated by both periods, and I'm looking at a box of Ancients goodness that just arrived from England today and wondering when I'm going to paint it. And so as far as Napoleonics goes, I came late to the party, and you guys have mentioned rule sets tonight that I really wish that I knew more about. Like, I've never played Age of Eagles, I've never played Shaco, I've never played Volley and Bayonet. I don't know if I'll ever have time or focus or partners to go back and research those, but I do know, and I think Glenn made a really good point, that we are kind of spoiled for we're spoiled for choice now. There's so much out there, and it's just
not a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's just a matter of sifting the good from the bad. And I think it's knowing what you want to play and what the people around you want to play. So the guys who go to my gaming club are just as likely to play, Silver Bayonet, as they are to play, something more crunchy. And I think there's a lot of people who will dabble a toe in this part of the hobby, and they might buy the Warlord, Battle of Waterloo set or whatever, and they'll never know the first thing about the Battle of Eylau, or they'll never know the first thing about what an Austrian line battalion looked like. It'll just be something fun that they'll do for a little while. So I think there's always a challenge for those of us who think of ourselves as grognards, and you guys have more cred there than I do, or aspiring grognards, in terms of, can we weigh the demands of knowledge, and the research against just the fact that this is a hobby that we want to offer to other people and may have to hold lightly as we offer it to them, right? Maybe be generous and emphasizing the playability and not, the complexity of the period. Although, Jim, I also have those campaign guides that David publishes. I have the one for Spain and the one for Russia, and they're super valuable for all sorts of reasons. I may never actually play a scenario as per his dictates, but they're, if you don't know the first thing about the opening battles of the Russian campaign, that's a great resource for sure. So anyway.
Well, yeah. And every scenario guide has to have Leipzig in it, because that's aspirational. No, and I think that's why
you're right.
That's why they put it in.
There are 3 aspirational battles: Borodino, Leipzig, and Waterloo.
Yes. And so you have to have one of those in your scenario book.
And one of them's playable.
I'm not sure you got. I might take the I might take the under on that. But.
All right. Well, gents, thank you all. You've graced our modest podcast with a lot of expertise and insight. And James and I are very, very grateful to you.
Yes.
And,
thanks, eh?
Yeah, thanks, eh? You guys are awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. That was great.
Absolutely. Truly was.
So we're back for what is basically part 2 of the podcast. We had our interview with our distinguished guests on the proliferation of Napoleonic rules last Friday night. It's now Wednesday night of the week following. That was a great discussion, James. It was super
It
lively.
was. It was. I think we got to some interesting points. And I don't know. I think we kind of answered why there's so many Napoleonics rules.
Yeah.
I think.
Well,
don't know.
I thought Don's answer, just sort of phobias, was
Yeah.
was spot on. And I don't know how many times you listen to or you read about people when they say, "Well, why do you have your own rules? Why did you write these rules?" And they'll often say, "Well, I didn't like all the other rules." And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's why I wrote my ancients rules.
yeah, yeah.
Because at the time I didn't like what was out there. It was, if you either played DBEM or DBA or Tactica.
Hmm.
And it's like, huh. So
Yeah. Well, and we could have had that discussion easily about ancients. So anyway,
yes.
it was a good discussion, and we do look forward to your comments. When we're very, very thankful to our guests, Don Perrin, Tom Castaños, Glenn Holmes, and Jim Ozarski for being part of our panel of grognards. Thanks, guys. That was great.
And Glenn Pierce.
Yeah, Glenn
You
Pierce.
said Glenn Holmes.
I did say Glenn
I thought
Holmes.
Yes.
Why did I say Glenn Holmes?
I
Anyway,
don't know.
Glenn Pierce. Glenn Pierce.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. The mind is the first to go as you get older.
Oh, I'm bad. I am terrible with names. It's a good thing I'm not in sales, because I would, very important client, I would fuck their name up.
Yeah, I have to say, as a minister, it's yeah. I often just sort of smile at people and say, "Hello, lovely to see you."
Yeah. Hi, you.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yes, lovely
Yeah.
to see you. Yes, welcome. Yes. Anyway, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. I just thought I would keep you up to date with our stats. So with 16
Ooh,
episodes,
stats.
yeah. So with 16 episodes of the Canadian Wargamer podcast in the can,
Woohoo!
we are up to on Podbean, which is where I get most of my stats from. We're up to almost 45, let's call it 45, 49 downloads. So we're ticking in on 5,000 downloads. Now, I have no idea how many of those are actually translated into people listening. Some of them may have just sort of erased their hard drive as soon as they heard us start to talk. And yeah, and we have 104 people following us on Podbean. So thank you, everybody.
Yay!
And then I went over to Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcast tells me we have 60 followers following us on Apple and 642 plays. So that's not bad for to
So like 5,500
yeah,
plays / downloads.
that's not bad
Over
for
16 episodes.
two guys nattering in their basement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So those are our stats, and that's encouraging. Thank you to everybody who listened. And once again,
Should I try yelling at clouds just to try
yeah, you could yell at clouds, and it would be saved to the
more
cloud.
viewers?
How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Give me some hot wargaming topic to get all angry about, and I can shake my fist and have these hot hard takes, and and then people can be very angry and write back, and
Well,
because that seems to be what that seems to be what drives clicks,
I think so. Yeah.
right? Is just
Controversy.
people spouting off about something when really the simple answer is, dude, if you don't like it, don't play it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have these woke people with their agenda are ruining my game. It's like, it's not your game.
Not your game.
Play it however the heck you want, dog.
Yeah. Yeah. If I wanted to get you going, I'd probably just give you a big old lazy Middle Earth topic to rant on, but we don't have time. We don't have. We'd be here all night if. What's wrong?
We'll make that a special episode. James Rancid things. We'll get Scott Cameron on too.
Yeah, it's only good if you're playing with Games Workshop figures. Okay, so James, do you remember we talked about our prize draw, and
yes,
a couple of episodes ago, I'm just going to hold these up to the camera for whoever's watching. We have these two very, very handsome Bob Murch Cossack figures. They are suitable for, I guess, anywhere from 1600 to 1800. They look like They look like two guys who would probably, be shooting at stragglers from the retreat to Moscow.
Or werewolves.
Or
Silver
werewolf.
bayonets. Silver bayonets all the rage.
Totally, absolutely, yeah.
And it is Bob Merch.
It is Bob Merch. You could do whatever you want with them, folks. Anyway, we said that we would give you a set if you wrote in, and if you just said, "Hey, I'm listening to your podcast. I like it," something like that. And I kind of thought we'd get crickets, but I went through the last 2 episodes, because this has been running for 2 episodes. I went through everybody who might have left a comment on Podbean, anybody who might have left a comment on our Facebook page, anybody who might have left a comment on YouTube. And I got 8 people.
8 people. Woo!
People, yeah.
Yay!
You know what?
8 people love us or like us, or 8 people want a chance at free figures, is what it is.
Well, exactly. You know
Was
what?
one of them Pete Garnham?
No, one of them was not Pete.
Really?
No figures. No figures for
Because
Pete Garnham.
he is usually a sucker for any kind of draw for free figures.
I just think he doesn't like listening to us.
That could be.
Yeah. You know what? I just realized I didn't quite double check YouTube, so I'm going to just do that really, really quickly as we're talking. Channel. Burp, burp, burp.
Oh, bummer.
Oh.
You know, I lived in a rural area, so we'd go to the.
That sounds like Yves Pierre or Pierre
That
Yves.
sounds like he's
Whatever,
Pierre.
6 months.
Yeah. And so there's actually another comment that I didn't pay attention to. And then
So we have 9 people.
we have 9 people. We have 9 people.
Hey, folks.
Oh, shut up, dude. All right. Okay. So we have 9 people. So originally I thought we had 8, and that was going to make it really easy, because I was just going to ask you to roll an 8-sided dice. So
Well,
this is
you know what?
What?
I'll roll a D10,
Have you got
and
a,
a 0 won't count.
okay. So you don't have a 9-sided dice.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Oddly enough, maybe you with that 3D printer, you could come up with one.
Yeah.
That'd be some neat geometry, though.
I'd have to download Tinkercad and then just spend like 3 weeks beating my head against it.
Yeah.
So, folks, this is what we call in the business double encryption. So I have the list of names, and James has the dice, and he's even wearing his apron.
Here is the 10-sided die.
Okay, folks. So just examine the dice very closely. It's
Yeah.
perfectly legit. Yeah. All right. So now James is going to roll it. Go ahead, James.
I'm going to grab a box that you, I think, gave me some 3D prints in.
Hurrah! This is so exciting.
And
So exciting.
10.
Oh, well, folks, there's no prize. Sorry, the figures. Okay, thanks for playing.
Okay, reroll.
Reroll.
Fuck off. Getting a new dice.
Oh, for
That was
God's
another 10.
For God's sake, James, we don't have time for this. People have things to do.
People have things to do.
Well, apparently not if you're listening to us.
Oh, there's that. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
This is embarrassing.
We have another nice old school D10 where I had to color in the numbers.
I remember doing that. I stole my mother's nail polish to do that.
Number 6.
Number 6. Number 6, the prize goes to Sean Hudson, or Hudson, Hutson. Sean, you left us a comment on Facebook, so I will send you a message in the morning.
Congratulations, Sean.
Congratulations, Sean, and thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, we'll get your prize out. That'd be great.
3 cheers and a tiger.
3 cheers and a tiger. And while we're talking about user feedback, I just wanted to share with our listeners a lovely little letter that we got from a guy called Richard. And I just have to find it. Yeah, so we got this lovely email about a month ago from a fellow called Richard Goiter. And Richard wrote to us and he said he wanted to drop you a note to let you know how much I'm enjoying the Canadian Wargamer podcast. I stumbled across it around October and am now fully caught up on the backlog and up to date, having just listened to the episode with PY or PJ or PV or HP. Yeah, it's, sorry, Yves Pierre. But that was a great interview. Richard goes on to say, you have had some great guests, with special mention for our mutual friend Pat Gilliland from Ottawa. Pat. That's right. He says Pat appeared to be the only sober member of your Christmas panel.
Yeah.
The Canadian content is also fantastic, although the book recommendations are making my to be read pile disturbingly vertiginous. Wow, extra style points for using the word vertiginous. And here's the
You know, to be killed by when you trip eating a donut and you're crushed by the pile of books falling on you.
yes, yeah, or they fall on your head during the night because the cat jumps on your bedside table.
Yeah.
Richard writes, and this is my favorite part, it is the presenting style of you both, which I can only describe as quintessentially Canadian, which makes it such a pleasure to listen to. Listening
Oh, that's just great, eh?
yeah, eh? Wow. That's like, he likes me better, eh? Listening to your,
Oh, get off, you hoser.
oh, you're a hoser. Listening to your well-informed, gentle bickering is a delight.
We're well informed.
We don't, apparently, we give that impression. Richard says,
Yeah, we fake it.
I know I will never be allowed on. I have one of those annoying English accents, but if you're bored, you can see how I deal with the wargaming affliction at myyearwithcharles.blogspot.com. And I would not nominate Glenn Pierce as a guest. He is full of knowledge and opinions on the hobby. Well, Richard, since you wrote that, Glenn Pierce, not Glenn Holmes, did appear on the podcast. But Richard, we're just so delighted that you listened and you sent us that very, very gracious email. So thanks so much.
And when we said early in episode 1 about English accents, we're more just talking about a lot of the podcasts are the British perspective, and so we're trying to add something to that. But also with Canadian gamers, like especially in the pulp Victorian science fiction colonial thing, people always put on these god awful fake accents. Whether it's they're role playing a British officer and you're using Cockney. It's like, no, dude, don't. Or a bad Scottish accent or Irish accent. So that's when we say no accent, we're not saying no bad fake accents. So if we have a guest with an honest accent, because that's what they were born with, that's cool.
It is true. And
so that's me saying that about that.
There you go. Yeah, and we did actually. I think I kind of wish I never said that earlier, but it's not that it's not that we're Anglophobic. It's just that we feel that there are a lot of really, really good podcasts with British participants, and that doesn't mean that we're not at some point going to talk to somebody from across the UK.
If we can get over the time difference.
The time difference, yeah. And
that kind of sucks.
So anyway, that's our housekeeping. And if you would like to get in touch with us, our contact information is found in the notes at the bottom of each podcast on Podbean. Just look at the long string of text, and there's lots of stuff. There's links to things we've talked about in each episode. There are clever quips, and there is contact information. So we now go to the Canadian Content Corner. Cue the music. Well, that is, of course, the Maple Leaf Forever, the old national anthem of the Old Dominion, and it marks the start of the Canadian Content Corner. That's the part of the podcast where James and I just have a bit of a natter about Canadian military history, about Canadian gaming, or just general Johnny Canuck stuff that makes us darn proud to have maple syrup coursing through our veins. And so as the Maple Leaf Forever, played by Her Majesty's Irish Guards, dies away, here is the Canadian Content Corner. Yeah. Well, in this Canadian Content Corner, I confess the cupboard is a little thin.
Well, we just had LardEh 2.
We did have LardEh 2. That was pretty. It was pretty Canadian.
It's pretty Canadian and a lot of content.
A lot of content. Well, maybe let's talk about LardEh 2.
Yes.
The name of
it was a good time.
Yep. Yeah. The name, of course, comes from LardEh, which is a reference to that particular Canadian speech pattern that some of us use and some of us don't use. Some of us think it's a bit of a myth, like oot and a boot. Our
Yeah.
American friends, we think we are always going oot and a boot. I'm not quite sure that's true, but
I've never heard anyone actually say that.
not really, no. But
Like, I'm not going oot. Every Canadian I know says out,
out.
and they put it on their boots,
Yeah, I'm
and they
oot.
go
Of,
about.
I'm oot of Agrax Earthshade. Yeah.
Oh,
What am I going to do about that? I'll have to.
well, you can go to Michael's and buy some sepia ink instead. Just throwing that out there. This is what I use.
That's right. I'll have to go oot to Michael's, eh? Yeah. So LardEh, there you go. Yeah, a little product endorsement from James. So LardEh, we talked about the run up to that with Chris Robinson. I guess the thing that I'm most excited about is that we, over the course of a day, we raised over $400 for the local Hamilton University Children's Hospital in McMaster.
That's pretty good. There's only like 25 people in the room.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know what, with Barnaby Orr flogging raffle tickets and saying he was going to beat people up if they didn't buy a set, you know, I bought all I could afford. I just, yeah, because
Oh, we really got to get Barnaby on because he's such a character.
he is.
And there would be our British content,
That
our
would
British
be,
voice, because he's an expat.
that would be a genuine British accent for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I always tease him when he's playing Infamy, and he had his this little unit of he's playing the British against the Romans, and he had this little unit of slingers. They're just trousers and tattoos and attitude, and running across, and they're throwing rocks and insults at the Romans. And I said, "Oh, does that remind you of a Saturday night when you're young?" And he said, "Well, they've got too many clothes on." Like, huh? You were obviously a much livelier person than me in my youth.
yes.
I was a pretty quiet kid.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Anyway.
so yeah, LardEh, it was great.
Yep. Well organized.
It was, except for trying to get in and out of Hamilton, that was hellish. Intersections are very badly signed, and having a major street closed off didn't help.
Yeah.
But I eventually used my land navigation skills to get home.
I just asked my car GPS to help me. I said, "Help me, GPS, help me."
I don't trust GPS because it always cuts out right when I need it, and also my phone doesn't talk to me anymore.
Oh well.
I don't know. I made it mad or something, and now when I say give me directions, it doesn't, like it used to speak, right? And now it doesn't. I don't know. I played with the settings and stuff, but anyway.
Maybe you forgot the anniversary date when you bought the phone, and it's just
that could be.
Yeah,
that could be.
It could be. I had an episode coming home. I was relying on the GPS in my car, and I'm taking the toll highway, the 407.
Yep.
UTR, and going north of the airport, and it wants me to turn off on Airport Road, and I said no, I'm not going to do that because eventually I'll be able to turn north on Highway 400 and go home to Barrie. This is totally meaningless to those of you who don't know Southern Ontario, so forgive us. But then it told me to get off on Highway 7, and I said no. And then I remembered that it told me that last November when I was coming back from the first LardEh in Hamilton, and I ended up getting lost in some suburb in Bolton because my GPS wanted to take me back roads home, and I just said, "No, screw you, GPS. I know where I'm going." Turned it off. Got home the rest of the way all by myself.
Next time I'm just gonna do a map recce and write myself a trip ticket and tape it to the dashboard.
There you go. Exactly. Old school.
Go old school. So, but anyway, yeah, LardEh was a good time. I played since we have the Battle of Waterloo coming up, and we were talking about Napoleonic rules. this episode.
Mhm.
I played a really lovely game of Sharp Practice. Set. I don't know. Does the War of 1812 count as Napoleonic?
It has to.
Yeah, it has to.
Yeah.
Roger Chrysler.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, good for me.
Friend of the podcast, by the way. Hey, Roger.
Hi, Roger. Yeah, lovely game. Really fun scenario. I don't know if it was historical or not. I think so. I think I read about the Battle of Frenchtown.
Yeah.
Um,
Roger was telling me that he has a family history from the War of 1812. His family's been in
oh,
Southern Ontario for a long time, and he's done a lot of research on it. So I would trust him.
okay.
He said,
Cool. We should have him on.
yeah, we should.
Yeah. And it was great that it was a my team won. Yay.
Yay.
That was fun. And then after lunch, when we visited that great old school hobby shop, the likes of which I haven't seen since my youth.
Yeah, what was the name of that place?
Hamilton Hobby Center.
Hamilton Hobby Center. Yeah, on Kenilworth, way in the East End.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah, deepest, darkest downtown
East End Hamilton.
East End Hamilton. Yeah.
It's pretty
kind of scary even in broad daylight, but it's a great store.
Yeah. Yeah. The
yeah,
guy
and then
the guy behind the counter looked like a young Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I don't think he took any crap from.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was just jam packed full of models, right, floor to ceiling, and
Oh, good.
we had, all kinds of goodies.
Modeler dream.
Yeah,
Lots of hat figures and lots of 148, 172nd scale tanks and stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah, I had to work really hard to talk myself out of buying a 1/700 scale aircraft carrier for my Beg the Hun stuff. Because that just would have been really super cool, but also $50.
You could use it as a jump off point, like literally, or
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It was a play rate of some sort.
Yeah. Well, and then after lunch I played this really great game of General d'Armée.
Oh, yes, I remember that game. The game master was especially handsome and youthful and well dressed. Yeah.
Oh, he's a spitting image of General Mack.
Thomas, if you're listening, that was a great comment. Yeah, some bewildered old guy with white hair wondering why is everything going wrong. Yeah.
No, well done you. That was a good, like, for your debut as a game master in a convention setting. That was very good.
Yeah, it was a fun game. It's one of those games historically where it seems to have been totally one-sided. But I thought that you and Thor, your colleague, had a look at the scenario and you realized that the only key to success was being totally aggressive. And yeah, good on you guys. So yeah, I would try General d'Armée again. I thought it was funny in the first half of the comments that Jim Ozarski said he didn't care for it. Whereas the two players who were playing the French, when I was chatting with them about rules, said they much preferred it to Sam Mustafa's LaSalle rules. So, horses for courses, I guess. But
yeah, it's what it's what you want out of a game, and
yeah.
I think that's like it's there's a bit of a learning curve because Dave Brown has kind of an odd writing style, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because there's a really good game in there with the handling your allocating your aide de camps to try and make things happen and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But once you I watched the videos on LardEh TV, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing wrong. And it made a lot more sense. So
yeah, I'm going to stick with those rules for a while. I think General d'Armée and LaSalle and Blucher are going to be my three go-to roles for a while.
Well, I have to stick with General d'Armée because that's what Scott plays.
Yeah.
So and we don't get together often enough to I really envy these groups where everybody's on the ball and they get together regularly and they can try different rules, you know.
Yes.
Like Scott's my only Napoleonic opponent. That isn't a recipe for success.
Sorry,
I think we'll just
you broke
learn
up.
them, enjoy them. Oh, did I? Oh,
Broke up. Why don't you try the last your last thought from the start again? You were talking about groups that meet regularly.
yeah, these groups that can meet regularly and try different rules and play around with it. You know, we like these rules for this sort of thing and those rules for that kind of game. And whereas like my main Napoleonic opponent, Scott, like we see each other 2-3 times a year. And trying to learn a new set of rules all the time is it's not going to be a recipe for success. So I think we'll just, you know, we'll learn General d'Armée because it gives a pretty good game. I think it simulates the important things and abstracts the things that aren't, which is what I'm looking for. And yeah, and we'll be happy.
There you go. I thought for the rest of the day, I had a really, I was pleased to see that Sean Malcolmson brought back his infamy rules, and I find myself thinking I should really have a look at those because the Foundry Jubilee sale I found was irresistible. I'm a sucker for Foundry. I like their figures.
They're pretty.
I ordered a whack of their Germanic warriors to augment my Victrix plastic ones. I have a bunch of Victrix Roman Auxilia because you told me get Auxilia, don't get early Imperials because the Auxilia did most of the fighting.
Yep.
And I have some Roman cavalry, and I'm thinking, you know, probably infamy would be the way to put all of that together. So yeah,
that'd be yeah. You probably got like 10 times as much Germans as you need for infamy, but
well, that's probably the what the Romans said at the Teutoburger Wald before they all died. Is that no, there's enough Germans. Stop.
Yeah, that's right. The army list says
enough with the Germans.
Yeah.
So thanks to Chris Robinson and Barnaby Orr for showing the spirit of the. I don't want to say the Canadian LardEh community, although we did have folks. We'd have one guy coming from out of province. I never got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, it came from Calgary.
Yeah, but it was really, for the most part, people in the Ontario area. And if you are in another part of Canada and you have a LardEh community that's thriving, let us know about it. We want to hear about it. But very, very pleased at the enthusiasm for the Two Fat LardEh games on this side of the pond.
Yeah, it's kind of neat how I know it has kind of created a community, you know, which really only rivals like I don't know, like you know, the 40K community or yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
You know?
So just a couple other things we're going to note before we wrap up the Canadian Content Corner. This is obviously we're recording this is June 8th. So people who are you know, keen about Canadian military history, of course, are thinking about the events immediately following the D-Day landings on Juno Beach. Our friend Brad St. Croix from On this Day in Canadian military history, his channel has some great interviews this week with people who are very, very knowledgeable about the Normandy campaign and the Canadian contributions. So Dr. Mark Milner is one, and I was listening to one the other day where he was talking to a fellow whose family history led him to research the Regina Rifles and their role in the Juno Beach landings and afterwards.
Yeah, they're one of the regiments in 3 Division, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think they were. I can't remember if they were which of the brigades they were in, but they were one of the first regiments ashore. So, Brad, well done on everything you do for for Canadian military history, and I'll put a link to your stuff in the podcast notes. And then the folks from Wilfrid Laurier University, from what used to be called the Center for Military and Disarmament Studies and is now called Center for Canadian Studies, I think. Anyway, I'll have to get that right in the notes. But they are reviving their Maple Leaf Route webinar series from last year, and they have some great content on not just on Normandy, but on the whole Canadian military experience in the Second World War. So I'll put a link to that up as well. Okay, that's the Canadian Content Corner for this week, this episode. Not this week, this episode. So, in the last little bit, James, when's the last time you were part of a Wargames campaign that you actually enjoyed?
A Wargames campaign. Well, I mean, we did kind of do a little bit with, I guess the last time was when you were at University of Waterloo, half an hour away.
Yep.
And we played a bit of a Longstreet campaign.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the last actual campaign I was in.
That's right. We carried the same formations over for 2 or 3 battles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some really easy rules in Sam's Longstreet rules to do that. That's right. Yeah, and that was probably, pretty simple, kind of like just an excuse to link a bunch of battles together. They don't always go well. I could tell long and sad stories of campaigns where people actually got really, really huffy and shirty with each other, and
yeah,
friendships broke up, and yeah, it's
like a bad game of diplomacy.
Oh my God, diplomacy. Yeah, I actually have an original copy of Diplomacy, and you know what? It's hard to find people to play it because it's one of those games where you have to like stab somebody in the face.
Yeah, well, it's got a really bad rep for ruining friendships, because
True.
That's how you win is when at the critical point you betray your ally, your friend that was counting on you, and now he's like, why are you invading me?
That's right. That's why you just play it online with strangers, because then you don't care. So the reason I'm asking about this is because I got an email from Pen and Sword the other day about an order that I had totally forgotten. And I thought, Pen and Sword, what did I order from Pen and Sword? And then I remembered that a year and a half ago I had ordered Henry Hyde's sequel to the Wargaming Compendium. His much anticipated book on wargaming campaigns, his guide to wargaming campaigns. And it just so happens that Henry was online very recently talking with our friend Jay Arnold, the veteran wargamer. They had a really, really great conversation about the contents of the book and why Henry wrote it and why it took, almost 2 years for the book to see the light of the day. And it's all fascinating. So I am looking forward to getting my dirty hands on that book eventually.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've warned Elizabeth that it's coming and that I paid for it 2 years ago. So, when this big book shows up in the mail, that doesn't come out of this year's gaming expenditures.
That's right. You can't get mad at me. Yeah, she can't get mad at you for ordering that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, she's always like, you've been spending a lot on PayPal. It's like, oh, I haven't been spending nearly as much as I want to. Yeah. Oh, I go to the Conqueror. I go to the Conqueror miniatures website and just drool over their dwarves regularly. Like the computer knows where I want to go. It's just one of the, you click on the URL bar and it's just one of the things that you want to go here, right? I was like, probably, yeah, yeah. Let's go look at dwarves. Every year, this year the project will be dwarves, and it's like, no, I got ships. Oh well. Yeah.
The computer is your enabler.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Henry asked some really good questions in his discussion with Jay that are really important. I think one of the questions was, like, what do you want to do? You want to run a campaign? Well, who doesn't want to run a campaign? Because they add sauce to the wargaming experience. They make, the random encounters that much more interesting because you've got, some kind of psychic skin in the game, right? You want to either capture the fictitious city that is part of the campaign map, or you just want to, you want to have more experience and level up your regiments so that the next time you face your opponent, whose regiments will be, depleted by your brilliant tactics, then you'll have a much happier second battle or third battle or whatever.
Yeah, and like Napoleon, you're not just going to chuck the guard in because it's 11:30 in the last turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can't replace those guys.
No, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I guess the Waterloo was the end of the campaign for Napoleon. That's for sure. Yeah,
Right?
No more campaign games for you, buddy.
Yeah.
And Henry makes a really good point about figure out what you want to do. Is this how complex do you want it to be, but also what is the appetite of your players for it? I mean, do you have players who might occasionally answer the odd email and with way less enthusiasm and way less detail than you, the referee, are hoping for, or are you just offering a kind of a back of the envelope kind of experience, but you have players who are like, no, I'm super interested to know how many transport wagons I have, and
Yeah.
So match your expectations with that of the players, and don't have false expectations on either side. And then I think, is it sustainable? So those are all really, really good questions.
Yep.
I think some of the most interesting blogs that I've seen are kind of solo campaigns, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy in the UK who calls himself Grymauch, Grymauch,
Yep.
who has a
Stopped
blog.
in a blog.
Yeah, and it's a nice blog, and he has 3 or 4 campaigns going at any given time. One was the Claudian invasion of Britain, I think, and he, in his interview with Sean from God's Own Scale, which I heard a long time ago, he says, I just have hearing problems. To be in a room with other gamers is intolerable to me, and so I just play solo because it works for me.
Yeah.
And he
Good on you.
puts a lot of thought into it. So
Yeah. Good that he found a solution that works for him.
yeah, and his blog, I think, becomes an extended narrative about an imaginary campaign. So
Well, and I remember from the old Don Featherstone Wargames campaigns book, where he, all kinds of great mechanisms like, using matchboxes to do hidden movement to play solo, right? And things like that. And he talks about keeping a campaign diary.
right.
So you have this lovely record of your glorious campaign to look back on. And now I think now blogs have kind of taken that they've taken that role.
For sure.
Like I use my blog basically as a gaming diary. Other people can read it, but I will go back and go, what did I do in this game, or how did I paint those guys?
Yeah, for sure. And that's where the blog does, I think, excels over like social media.
Yeah, exactly.
Every now and then I haul out this book. This is Bruce Quarry's Napoleonic Campaigns in Miniature.
Okay.
And it's absolutely fascinating. He talks about lines of communication and supply, and I think the Empire Rules had a campaign supplement as well, where you could think about that sort of thing. He talks about organization, recruit training, medical.
Yeah, he gets very crunchy, like into this is how much it costs to recruit a musketeer.
Yeah.
And equip him, and
I think that might work if you were, I don't know. I don't want to say stuck on a desert island, but if you had a lot of time and a lot of imagination, and you wanted to maybe create like a fictitious minor German state, right? But kind of like your Borderia and Mantovia, only in the Napoleonic period.
Yes, well, I've thought about that too. I thought long and hard about what Mantovia. Obviously, they're in the Confederation of the Rhine.
Right.
You know, and I think that crested helmets, like the Bavarians and Baden troops.
Of course, yeah. And caissons that look suspiciously like the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile.
The Wurstwagen, yes. I need
Wurstwagen.
to get one for my Bavarians.
You do, yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody needs horse artillery, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you need it in the Wurst way.
Yeah.
I have to laugh at my own jokes.
Drone.
So Henry Hyde's campaign books, we are looking forward to. We're looking forward to that, and yeah, if you have an experience with a campaign that you want to talk to us about, we'd love to hear about it. So let us know. So we're getting to the winding down stage, and I thought we would maybe just finish by talking about what we are working on. And I see you painting assiduously as we talk. You're painting Prussian transport.
I am painting my Prussian artillery train, as you can see. Where there we go. There are the gunners. They're done. I just got to check them for errors.
Right.
And we've got two 6-pounders and a howitzer. And then a limber and an MDF caisson.
Yeah, that's the one you were telling me about. You got the great service from War Bases, right? For that caisson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the Perry limber, you can only get a 6-horse team. So I basically took 2 horses off the limber team and I put it on the MDF caisson. So that's my frugal thing for the night. Although I think I've totally messed up which horses go where, because yeah, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
All that leather on them isn't the same, and I think it's important which goes where. You know, like it designates one horse as one pair is the lead horses, and other pair is not. And I don't know.
This is the thing where I think about history sometimes, and I'm just amazed at how much expertise has walked around armies over the centuries. So, like our friend Don Perrin, who trained as a REME officer, right?
Yep.
How to repair tanks and mechanical systems on the battlefield. His historical equivalent from the Napoleonic period would have been some guy who knew how to harness, a 16 horse to a limber, how to fix the limber on the battlefield, how to fix the strapping, the harnesses. I mean, people walked around knowing how to do that stuff.
Oh yeah, you had your leather workers, you had your smiths, you had your carpenters and woodworkers.
Yeah.
And these were all these were all very highly skilled tradesmen that weren't they weren't shoved into the firing line unless they absolutely needed to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have I'm just fascinated by this idea of equivalents, like historical equivalents, right? So I have a book that I'm in my stack of books to read from a guy I knew when I was doing my
It's nearly all clock.
military paid graduate studies. This is a guy called Arthur Gullickson, who was an officer in the Royal Canadian Regiment who's now teaching at Royal Military College. And this book is his doctoral thesis, which was about
Give us the title for our listeners on the radio.
It's called An Army of Never-Ending Strength, Reinforcing the Canadians in Northwest Europe, 1944-45. And he basically talks about, how the Canadian Army reinforced itself. Its logistics, its administration, its workshops. It's similar to that book that I was talking about last episode about training NCOs, right?
Yeah.
And for his research, I remember Arthur telling me that he looked at the records for things like workshop companies that were servicing, Canadian tanks and putting them back into the line, right? And how they compared to their German equivalents. Well, spoiler alert, they did much better because they weren't being bombed all the time and they weren't having to retreat.
That helps a lot.
That helps, yeah. And the fact that the Germans often retreated and left their vehicles, their damaged vehicles on the battlefield, whereas Canadians usually, Allied armies owned the battlefield at the end of the day and could recover them. So,
Yep.
um,
Logistics. It's important.
yeah, but you
Go
know,
figure.
you 200 years back, and there's like a bunch of guys walking around Napoleonic wagon park, going, can we fix that caisson? Yes, no. Can we take that wheel and put it on that caisson? Can we,
Yep.
like,
Yeah, there totally would be.
and
That's for
you
sure.
get some officer saying, I need this done by, sunrise, and make it happen.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. Good on you. Speaking of wheel things, I don't have any pictures to show, but I am just finishing off tonight. I'm finishing off 3 15-millimeter chariots. I think I put something on social media about that. My ancients fascination is pretty lively right now. So I've just finished a
really got-
DBA early Hebrew army.
Hmm.
Well, I say they're early Hebrew. They're really just a bunch of guys in loincloths and bushy beards and pointy sticks and shields of various descriptions running around. But
Shields of various description.
yeah, some are round,
Is-
some are square. Some
Is
are
that an act? I wonder if that's an actual acronym in WRG world.
shields of various descriptions. SVD.
SOVDs.
Yeah, 3 ox SVD probably would be the
Yeah.
DB equivalent. So, and then I just got some 3 Essex miniatures armies: Assyrians, Babylonians, and late Hebrews. And I have to say, the Essex figures, my first time I've ever seen Essex figures in the wild. Oh my goodness, they're tasty.
Oh, really? This is your first encounter with Essex?
First encounter with Essex figures.
Oh,
Yeah.
sweet summer child.
I know. Eh? Where have
Like,
I been?
I've had all kinds of Essex and passed through my hands.
No, I'm.
And and they're definitely in this day and age of in a 24 figure unit, you've got 24 different poses.
Mhm.
They're kind of old fashioned for that.
Yeah.
You kind of get like maybe 2 poses, and they tend to be a little on the stiff side, but they're good. Like they do the job, like and they especially like rank up well for things like DBA.
Yeah. They have a
Mhm.
certain charm to them. And
Yeah.
well, I'm currently finishing a 20 mil front rank Prussian Fusilier regiment, and all of the riflemen, the Fusiliers, they're all in the same pose. They're all in the march attack pose. There's
No variation.
no variation. No, there's 2
Oh.
identical drummers. There's 2 identical NCOs, 2 identical standard bearers, 2 different officers. That's it. And, it has a certain old school charm to it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And at least you're not, when painting armies like that, like once you've painted the same figure a couple of times, it gets a lot easier.
that's true. Yeah.
And instead of oh my god, like every figure is a whole new, how do I approach this?
Yeah. Yeah, different surfaces, different challenges in texturing and shading.
Yeah.
And stuff. Yeah, for sure. And it occurred to me that going back to campaigns, that having a couple of DBA armies of the same period, like say a Hebrew army and a Syrian army, or an Assyrian army, means
Totally.
you've got like a little mini campaign. You've just got 2 or
Yeah.
3 laddered battles.
You can play it out in a night.
Yeah, for sure. And you and I will probably do that at some point.
That's that and to me that is the real strength of DBA, which well, I know I've kind of been away from the ancient scene for a long time, but I when I was in the ancient scene, that strength for DBA wasn't being leveraged enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough talk about doing campaigns and
Yeah.
that's
And
interesting stuff.
I'm just finding that the whole DBA introduction to the ancient world to be fascinating, because I think I may have said this last time. I repeat myself. If you don't know the ancient world, and you don't know, for example, the difference between a Mede and a Sumerian and an Elamite, and you're a little hazy on, what order was it? Was it like Assyria, Babylon, Persia?
Right.
The DBA is a great way to sort it all out really quickly, right? You can, like, I'm fortunate that I have a copy of that WRG Guide to the Ancient World, which I don't have handy right now. I paid a bucket of money for it from a used bookstore in New Zealand because it's been out of print for ages.
Yeah.
And you can start looking at these armies and saying, okay, so these are the Elamites. Who did the Elamites fight? And you can grab some source material and start making sense of it. So, and then I'm amazed that, because I really, really never did a course in ancient history and always thought this was all just sort of incomprehensible. Until I was in Ethiopia 2 years ago teaching a course to seminary students on the book of Isaiah. And I suddenly realized Isaiah is really, besides being a great book of prophecy and religious poetry, it's a military history. It tells you all about, ancient Israel's campaigns against Assyria and their allies and enemies, the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, Canaanites. I have this idea one day that I'm just going to do a Bible study on the book of Isaiah, and everybody who shows up, all my old church ladies, I'll just give them each an army. Say, okay, here's your army, Mrs. Smith. Here's the Assyrians, Mr. Jones. There's the Babylonians. Pay attention, because I'm going to go through the rules in 10 minutes, and we're going to start fighting. I don't know. Could be fun.
Or could cause a one-sided conversation with the bishop.
Well, I'm sure the bishop will be all in favor of innovative ways of ministry. That's going to be my story.
You give them a powerhouse army like the Assyrians to play.
Yeah. Yeah. My early Hebrew army has no mounted troops. It's all light infantry, and I'm really hoping that I roll well on the terrain, because if I don't have like rough hills and things to hide in and fight from, I'm dead.
Oh yeah, totally.
But
He's so dead.
But it's one of those fun armies where you say, okay, it's not a powerhouse army. It's it's like the Ukrainians in the first few days of the Russian invasion, right? It's like, how clever can you be? So there you go. So yeah, I'm working on,
and it all comes down to the dice too, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Like if your opponent is rolling badly, then you're gonna do okay.
Yeah. Somebody once said, how do you win at DBA? You roll more sixes than your opponent. So
yes,
there you go.
That is wise advice.
It is wise advice. True in most games. Well, my friend, I think that wraps up our natter for this episode.
Well, okay. Edit that out.
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
There's a burp.
We will be back in July, and we're hoping to have a guest in August who is very knowledgeable about professional military education with Canadian Armed Forces. So we'll have more to say about that soon. That's something that I'm working on confirming right now. And
cool.
That'll be exciting. All right. Well, it's good night from me.
And good night from me.
Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. Please do us the favor of leaving us a comment wherever you listen to this podcast, and please give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Tell other people about the Canadian Wargamer podcast. It's a labor of love that we do simply because we want to tell stories about the Canadian wargaming scene in a small but feisty country. There you go. And if you don't do any of those things, we will send attack beavers to chew on you. So there you go. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.